What is going on, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Cooking with Coach, where we take all of your favorite recipes and we put a healthy spin on it and make them super macro friendly and guilt-free. I'm your host, Coach Jay. Today we're going to be making my second favorite dessert, and that is brownies. And we're not just talking about any brownies, we're talking about like
amazing fudgy brownies.
But we're gonna be putting a healthy spin on it. This is going to be low carb, low sugar, and dairy free. Let's talk about what goes into a regular brownie. So you have the butter, you have the sugar, you have of course the chocolate, then you have the cocoa powder, and we're gonna swap out a few of those ingredients for healthier options. Now, instead of butter, we're gonna be using avocados today. Now, some of you are like, what in God's name are you thinking? Green, vegetable, put this on a salad, going into a dessert. This is one of those moments where you're just gonna have to trust the process. But with avocados, they are so mild in flavor, they honestly can take on the flavor of anything you place with it. So being that chocolate is extremely strong and overpowering, it's going to overpower the flavor of the avocado, and you're not even gonna, I don't even wanna say barely.
You're not even going to taste it at all.
All it's gonna do is it's just going to add that nice fudgy texture that we know and love in fudge brownies. So that's what we're gonna be doing. On top of which, instead of regular flour, we're gonna be using our homemade baking mix that I have an entire video on. So if you don't know how to make this, you're brand new to the channel, go ahead, look for this recipe. This is something you can make anytime you need a low carb waffle mix, pancake mix, whatever you need for dessert. If you want to make this more savory, like I've said before, you can go ahead and omit the sugar from the recipe and just make it savory instead. And then, instead of regular chocolate chips, we have our sugar-free chocolate chips. These are my go-to. If I have to order these online because I don't have access to them in a store, I will do it. That's how amazing these chips are. They are higher fiber, lower sugar, and they don't taste like chemicals. They literally taste exactly like dark chocolate or semi-sweet chocolate. That's what we're gonna be adding in this, which is gonna make it super low carb. It's gonna make it sugar-free. It's gonna make it super macro friendly, and it's gonna be guilt-free. So you can give them to all of your friends and kids and even eat the whole pan yourself. All right, let's go ahead and get started with this recipe. First, we need to mash up our avocados. You're gonna need to make sure that they are ripe. Now, how do we know that they are ripe and ready to go? Because trust me, I've made the mistake where I bought an avocado and I've cut into it and it was as hard as a rock. You're gonna want to go to your local grocery store, and then with every avocado, you just want to put a little bit of pressure and press it all around. And if there's a little bit of indentation or it's a little soft, that is perfect. You wanna make sure that your avocados aren't overly ripe, though you can still use overly ripe avocados. They're just gonna have a little bit of brown in them, but don't worry. If they're a little overripe, you're gonna mask that with the cocoa powder, so don't even worry about that. So these are perfect. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna cut them and put them in this bowl, and I'm gonna go ahead and mash them up. Now, I came up with this recipe when I was, usually all of my recipes happen when I'm dieting. And that's because when I'm dieting, I usually cut out all of my sweets. And the challenging part when you're dieting and you're so hungry sometimes and all you have laying around the house is sweet snacks, you often tend to be like, what can I do? What can I eat? And there were times when I had to go grocery shopping because I didn't have groceries, and all I had were Oreos sitting in the pantry And I was like, there's no way. There's no way that I'm gonna sit there and eat Oreos instead of a healthy meal. So I came up with something that I figured would be healthy, and turns out it is, and it tastes really good. So I'm not mad. But let's look at these avocados really. These are perfect. They're green, there's no brown. So remember, always do that little finger test where you're pressing the avocado all around, not just in one spot, all around, to make sure that it is fairly soft all the way through. And if you cut into it and it feels like you're cutting into like a carrot, it's definitely not ready. These were not ready when I got them. They were still a little firm, so I just let them sit out at room temperature for a few days, and then they just got right. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to spoon these out. Just like so, super easy. And now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna match it. We're gonna mash them. Cue English teacher. So we're gonna go ahead and mash the avocados. Now, you wanna try to get them as smooth as possible. Try not to have any sort of clumps, because the last thing you wanna do is see this, or flecks of green, when your brownies are done baking. This is a great way for you to hide vegetables in baked goods. If you want to get your kids to eat more avocado, or you know that they're lacking in some healthy fats and you just want to trick your kids, this is the best way to do it. You want like a smooth guacamole consistency. And once you get the consistency that you're happy with, essentially, some people like chunks. For me, if I'm gonna be eating a brownie, the last thing I wanna see is green in there. I'm currently messing with my own head. When I made this recipe, I was messing with my own head. And I just wanted to believe that I was eating regular fudge brownies, so. And I know it's gonna look like a lot in the bowl, but remember, this is taking the place of butter, and this is going to add that fudgy texture in the brownies. So don't be afraid if you're like, oh, this is two avocados? It looks like a lot. So this is what it's gonna look like. I'm really happy with this texture, so I'm gonna go ahead and keep this texture, and I'm gonna go ahead and transfer it into my mixing bowl, where I'm gonna now mix all of the ingredients together. So let's go ahead and mix this in. You would think I'm making guacamole. No, 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 no. And if you're trying to sneak this and you have kids in the house and they think that you're making guacamole, just let them believe it. Just let them believe it and then pretend like, oh no, I have no idea what you're talking about. I made brownies instead. So, we love avocado. So now that that's mixed, well, now we're mixing. It's not mixed yet. We're gonna go ahead and now add our 2 whole eggs. And then we're going to combine them. You wanna make sure that you wanna combine all of the ingredients within steps, especially if you're doing wet first and then you wanna add the dry later. And the reason why is you wanna make sure that the egg is well combined, so you're not getting bits and pieces of yolk and whites everywhere. You want it to be as smooth of a texture as possible. Like I said before, we don't wanna have certain areas that are unbaked because the egg wasn't properly mixed in. So it should just be homogenized. I'm trying to use science terms here so I can sound really smart. And that looks perfect. So you want to go ahead and make sure it looks like this. It's gonna look like just a smooth green consistency, so that's perfect. Now, wipe my hands down. So now we're gonna go ahead and add all of the dry. So first thing is we want to add our baking mix. So this is gonna have everything that we need. It's gonna have the leavening agent, it's going to have the almond flour, the xanthan gum to make everything nice and congealed. So this, we just want a half a cup. And for the most part, anytime that you're doing a baking recipe, unless they specify that they need the measuring cup packed, it's usually a loose measure. So that's a quarter cup and half a cup. From there, we're gonna go ahead and we are now going to add our cocoa powder. Now this is gonna give it that super deep, rich flavor. This is unsweetened dark cocoa powder. So here I have a level quarter cup. This is going to give it its nice, rich, dark color. And it's going to cancel out that green. Once that's done, remember what I said. You want to make sure everything is mixed in layers. So before we even add the chocolate, we're now going to mix this. So take your time mixing this. You don't need to move quickly. You just want to fold it. And this is where I want to make a Schitt's Creek joke and say, but how do you fold it? So what you want to do is scoop the sides and then cut it down the middle. Scoop the sides, cut it down the middle. And what that's gonna do is, and I'll show you right now. So you scoop the side and then you cut it down the middle like that. And that's how you fold without creating such a mess. And you're gonna have a really nice, thick, chocolatey batter. From here, now that this is fully mixed, we're gonna go ahead and add the chocolate chips. Here I'm adding a quarter cup of chocolate chips. I just added a little extra because I really enjoy chocolate. And you just want to mix it through so that way you evenly have chocolate chips throughout your batter. And once your batter is ready to go, you are ready to put it in your baking tray. So I'm gonna go ahead and get everything out of the way, and then we're gonna go ahead and put it on our baking tray and get this bad boy in the oven. So here we have our baking tray. Now you want to use an 8x8, but because this is a very low budget production, I don't have an 8x8, so I'm gonna be making one. And if you're in the same boat as me, listen up and see how I do this. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna take this pan, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cover up until about here with aluminum foil, and I'm gonna create my own little wall with aluminum foil. So it's gonna stay nice and stable, and you're gonna have a beautiful square. So take your non-stick aluminum foil If you have regular aluminum foil, that's totally fine. I prefer nonstick. I find that nonstick just works easier for this. And as you can see, it is the perfect size for the entire pan. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna curl this over the bottom like so. Press it into the pan. Making sure that it's as flush to the edges as possible. And then from here, I'm gonna take the foil and I'm going to fold it over, creating my 8x8. Now this might take a little practice. It took me a little bit of practice to figure this out myself. But once you have it figured out, it is so easy, so simple to do. And there you have it, your own homemade 8x8. So we're gonna go ahead and now we're going to spray our nonstick with a little bit of coconut oil. And then we're gonna go ahead and start pouring our batter into the baking dish. Once you pour the batter into your baking dish, go ahead and spread it out so it's an even layer, as even as you can get it. Make sure you take everything off of the spoon. You don't want to lose any of that goodness. And then just start ever so gently spreading your batter out. Once you've got it all spread out on your tray, you can do a couple of things before you pop it into the oven. So you can go ahead and take your chocolate chips, and I know I said only half a cup, but if you really want to get a little fancy with your chocolate, you can go ahead and take a few extra chocolate chips and just sprinkle them on the top like I'm doing right now. You can also add some chopped walnuts or almond slivers if you feel like adding an extra crunch. And when you're done decorating your brownies, go ahead and pop these in the oven at 350 degrees for about 15 to 20 minutes. Just checking periodically to make sure that the top is nice and firm and fully baked. Again, you want these to be fudgy, you don't want these to be overbaked. If you like yours a little more overbaked, go ahead and leave them in there for an additional 5 minutes. All right, so I just checked on my brownies. They're completely ready to go. And this is an indication that you want to look for. When you are looking at your brownies and you want to make sure that they're ready, if you're unsure, if you're like, ooh, I don't know if I need to leave them in there for another minute or two, if the batter itself went from glossy to a matte finish and you press your fingers onto the brownie itself, it should feel slightly firm to the touch, but still have a little bit of softness. That's going to be that fudginess that we like. So you want to let this completely cool before you cut into it. I promise you, do not skip the step
at all,
because it's going to just fall apart. You want it to cool completely before you start to cut it up and serve it or just eat it for yourself. What's going to happen is it's just going to fall apart and it's just going to get really messy. So go ahead and let this cool before you slice it up. I'm going to do that, and I'll be back in about 5 to 10 minutes to slice it up and show you the final product. I'm so excited. Now that I've let our brownies cool, we're gonna go ahead and start to slice them. So all I did was remove the aluminum foil portion on that cookie sheet. off, flattened it out completely so it's easy to transfer after I'm done cutting it. So I'm going to cut it into 3 even squares, or as even as I can get them, or rectangles. You think I would know my shapes by now. I'm gonna cut them lengthwise down, creating rectangles, and then I'm gonna go ahead and cut them again across to create squares. Now, if you want to make this more bite-sized or you want to have this more travel-friendly, what you can do is you can cut them even more and make them into smaller cubes. That's total personal preference. I usually do that when I'm traveling, so it's just easy to carry with me. And if I have a big piece of a brownie, what happens is it usually gets all crumbly. But for the sake of today, all we're just gonna do is we're gonna leave them as is, as big squares. Go ahead and plate them. And I mean, come on. Just look at that. It looks thin, but it's really fudgy. And if I were to just rip this bad boy open, just look at this. Ooh. Oh man. This is just like, I'm super excited about this. Super chocolatey. Not too sweet. You really get that cocoa flavor through. I taste no avocado whatsoever. The avocado just adds that nice fudgy texture to the entire recipe, and it's worth it, promise you. You all need to make this recipe. Promise you, you will not regret it. And here's the great part. If you want to have 2 pieces of these, and these are not small, you can have 2 because that's your serving size. Anyways, have an amazing day. I will see you on my next episode. Goodbye.